Hello, and welcome to this lecture on tap versus bottled water, which is better. To get us started, let's talk about the functions of water. Water acts as a solvent. It's something that other things can be dissolved into in your body and then moved throughout the body for its use, like salts, etc. It works for body temperature regulation. It's a great way to absorb excess heat, perspire out when you need to, and allow it to evaporate off to allow yourself to cool down. It also works as a natural way to remove body waste via urine from the body and urea excretion. And finally, it works as a lubricant or shock absorber. And if you look at the image to your right, what you see is we are mainly consisting of water. That's the main component that we're made out of. One question you may have then, if water is so important, is are you consuming enough of it? Are you drinking enough of it? Well, the recommended dietary allowance for water every single day is at least 9 cups for women, 13 cups for men. That's a starting point. It could be more depending upon your athletic status, what you're doing, how hot out it is, etc. But one thing you can do to look at to see whether or not you're consuming enough water is looking at your urine. Urine is the major output of water. There's other ways we lose water throughout the day, but looking at urine color will tell us what hydration level is. If urine is clear or slightly yellow, that means hydration status is okay. But as it gets darker and darker yellow or even brown, that means there's a lot of dehydration happening in the body. It needs immediate action and consumption of water. With the same idea, people are like, well, don't worry, I'll drink when I get thirsty. Well, in fact, the thirst mechanism is not reliable. It usually lags behind actual loss. So for example, during prolonged exercise or during an illness, you may not feel thirsty, but in fact you are, which is why it's important to keep on pushing those liquids throughout the day. And if you're sick, keep pushing those liquids. It becomes a major concern for infants, older adults, and athletes. For example, children will not drink water until they feel thirsty, so it's always important to keep a bottle of water or a cup of water in front of them. Athletes have the same problem. Swimming, people don't realize that they're losing so much water because they're in the pool, but you are sweating in the pool as well. You need to keep a water bottle there for yourself as well. And with this idea also with illness, etc., make sure you're pushing those fluids. The recommendation of where you get your water from is from water itself. You can see you can get water from teas, coffees, milk, etc. But in reality, for the recommended servings per day, water, it says at least 1.7 liters, but everything else is 0 to a certain amount of fluid ounces. And that's because you should be getting your water from water. You shouldn't be getting it from anywhere else. So where do we get our water from? So the thing to keep in mind is we have two different supplies of water in the United States nowadays. One is tap water and another is bottled water. So some people say, which is better for me? Well, in reality, tap water, and as we're going to talk about, is the preferred way that you consume water throughout the day. Tap water is controlled by the Safe Water Drinking Act. It monitors for bacteria, chemicals, toxic metals you might find in your water. U.S. water supply is amongst the safest in the world because of the Safe Water Drinking Act. And most people, the reason they don't like drinking tap water is actually simply because of the taste. So when we add chlorine to water, we add fluoride to water, which was really tasteless, but at the same time, there may be other impurities in your water. You can take those impurities out by putting in a Brita or pure water filter. That'll pull the chlorine out for you. If you leave your water out overnight before you consume it, the chlorine will naturally evaporate and then it will taste better for you, because a true good taste for water is it should taste like nothing. So usually when people don't like tap water, it's just because it's gone through different pipes, etc., and they don't like the taste of it. On the flip side, bottled water, people consume around 30 gallons of bottled water per year. That's 9.4 billion bottles in total are consumed. People think that bottled water is safer than drinking water. This is not true. Bottled water and tap water are both highly regulated by the FDA and EPA, so you're not going to find problems with your tap water versus your bottled water. It's not going to make you safer to consume that. It goes back again to the difference in the taste. Usually tap water is chlorine treated, spring water may be ozone treated, so it's not going to get that taste people don't like. The idea of bottled water being pure is an advertising term. It means nothing from a regulation perspective about water. And what we know is that drinking bottled water is extremely expensive. Typically, people will pay about $1,500 to $3,000 per year to consume bottled water. For the same amount of tap water consumed, it will cost you 50 cents. Now think about that when it comes to your bottom line, your bottom dollar, and you're trying to say to yourself, I want to save some money. Sticking to tap water can really help with the bottom dollar, bottom line. The other thing to keep in mind with most bottled water is it's actually filtered tap water. So if you look at a bottle of bottled water and it says purified, what that means is it's literally from the tap. They just ran it through a Brita or pure water filter or something similar like that. What companies do this? Dasani, Aquafina, Vitamin Water, Smart Water, they're all tap water. They're nothing different than what you're getting out of the tap, but you're paying a lot for them. Keep in mind the other problem with bottled water, especially if it's going to be from spring water, it doesn't contain fluoride. Fluoride is essential as a necessary element for bone and teeth health, and also for bone health itself. Now, the problem when we move all this water around, so when you think about tap water, that's coming from a local source. But when you go to bottled water, we're actually moving water from one source to another. We call it blue gold because it costs a lot of money and it's very expensive nowadays. So in New York City, where we're located for this course for the most part, our water source is not coming from the Sound, it's not coming from the Hudson River, it's coming from watersheds. There's a huge Croton watershed and also a Catskill Delaware watershed. We're piping our water in from those regions. And you can see we're talking about areas that are more than 60 or 70 kilometers away at different times to actually allow to be consumed by over 9 million residents in the New York City area. We're moving water away from its source to where it's needed, which is good. And obviously this tap water is very good, very healthy, very safe. But at the same time, there can be consequences when we move bottled water from farther distances away. So when people consume bottled water, you can get bottled water from Hawaii, you can get it from Fiji, you can get it from California, etc. But the problem with that, obviously, is it's moving their water tables. When we consume water in our area, it stays in the water table because we're excreting it back into the same water supply. In this case, though, you're moving it from somewhere in one region and not replenishing it with anything else. This causes a lot of plastic waste. It causes, droughts in different areas, and we can see this. In fact, some of these images here are people in Maine because of Poland Spring water saying no bottled water, and water is a human right and it's not for sale. These companies are going in and getting the rights to actually consume or taking 1 million gallons of water a day or similar, and it's taking that water supply away from the people that live there. The other problem is with bottled water, obviously, is this plastic doesn't all end up recycled. We can see here that the overall amount of weight of the plastic bottles has decreased, and that's a good thing. But the real problem is bottled waters don't get recycled. Bottled waters, plastic in general does what we call downcycling. You use it one time when it's new, and the next time it's a worse quality plastic, and then after that it's absolute trash. You can't keep on turning plastic around and recycle and recycle and recycle it again. It has a very short recycle lifespan, so therefore by consuming plastic bottles and using plastic bottles, in reality those are going to end up in a landfill at some point, which is obviously a major socioeconomic and environmental issue we're facing nowadays. One of the ways we see this playing out is by the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. If you haven't seen this before, I recommend you type it into Google or Wikipedia or something to find out more. This patch is all plastic in the Pacific Ocean, which is bigger than Texas. All right, so it's basically 3 Texases put together, 3 Spains and Portugals put together. It is massive. And the thing with plastics is it's not just on the top layer. Plastics, because they have different densities, they move throughout the water, different layers, they find different depths. No matter where you go in the ocean nowadays, you go more than 20 feet basically and you hit plastic. And it's because plastic doesn't biodegrade. It's there for millions of years. And so we see that it accumulates because of the currents in one specific area, for example, in the Pacific Sea, and that's in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And so you can see that in the ocean there. It's not going anywhere. And look at what it takes to biodegrade these things. We're talking, hundreds of thousands of years. This is a problem for what we consume. We now know that we're consuming plastics or microplastics in our food, and it's because of all the plastics ending up in our water. Sort of looks like this. So we can see how the plastic will end up in different areas. We can see here different images of what happens when animals consume it. So for example, there's a pelican carcass on the upper right hand corner. Plastics look shiny. Shiny for seabirds. They think of shiny, they think of fish, so they consume it. The problem is, look at the carcass of this pelican. It was full of plastics. It was full of plastics. Killed the animal. On the bottom left hand side, we can see here a seal, and in this case the seal has a piece of plastic that got caught on its neck when it was younger, but then that plastic doesn't break down, and as the seal grew up, it stayed there, but it's cutting into its neck. It will cause death of the animal eventually. So if we're going to use water bottles then, we know now tap water is better than bottled water. We know the dangers of plastic in our environment. So what are we going to go with? Stainless steel bottles are always best. Stainless steel and even things like aluminum are infinitely recyclable. You can turn that around over and over again. So even when you're done with the product, we can recycle that back and make something new forever. We never have to stop. If you're going to be going for plastic, look for recycling codes 2 and 4. Avoid plastic codes with anything really 3 through 7. If it doesn't say BPA free, avoid that plastic in general. But usually, especially codes 1 and 2, and sometimes 4 are more easily recyclable than others. But again, only 1 or 2 times. Choose recycle reusable bottles with a wide mouth. It makes it easier for you to clean it out. And if the plastic bottle on the inside gets scratched, cracked, it's now garbage. Throw it out because that's where bacteria can grow, and obviously that can be deleterious to your health. And finally, don't store containers of water in a hot garage, back of your hot car. What happens is a leaching effect. So as the water warms up, it leaches the chemicals from the bottle into your water, and then you're consuming that. Some people think the same thing happens with putting it in the freezer, but that's not true. In fact, when you put something cold, that leaching effect takes longer to happen. So in fact, putting bottles of water in the freezer is just fine. So that's it. I hope you learned something about tapped versus bottled water, how to consume water if you are going to go with bottled water, and we'll see you in the next lecture.